Hey friends, we are live. This is John Bush with the Live Free Now show, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live a more free and prosperous and healthy life. And today I want to talk to you about freedom cells, among all things, but I want to talk specifically in the context of how freedom cells provide an opportunity to essentially have an alternative means of social organization as this technocratic control grid continues to grow and expand. It's very possible that people can be shut out of activities that they have grown accustomed to. This isn't a far-fetched idea. It's not a far-fetched, radical, crazy conspiracy theory of a concept. It's already taken place in other countries across the globe. And this was in the works and in the cards by many technocrats. Many ruling elite wanted to increase surveillance across the globe for quite some time, wanted to increase control, wanted to create an environment where it was easy to remove what they believe are privileges from human beings. And now we see, after the COVID-19 stuff, which is still totally underway, we see that agenda is being dramatically accelerated. So I would like to offer an alternative in a way that we can still maintain community, financial trade, access to food, travel, and all that jazz in light of all the craziness going on in the world. But first, I want to thank our sponsors real quick. Brave Botanicals. You can try a free ounce of kratom. Go to freeounceofkratom.com. If you're watching us on the Conscious Resistance Network, go to bros.freeounceofkratom.com, bros.freeounceofkratom.com, and try an ounce of kratom. It is a powder that's been used for hundreds of years in Southeast Asia. The green and white varieties are great for stress and anxiety and energy and focus. And then a lot of people take the red varieties for chronic pain. They all also help to overcome addiction. Many people use kratom in order to quit taking prescription pain medicine. So check out bros.freeounceofkratom.com. You can just pay $5 in shipping and handling and get an ounce of kratom delivered to you. That's our sponsor there on the Live Free Now podcast. So let's get right down to it. This topic came to mind because a few days ago, we hosted the 4th International Freedom Cell conference call. There was around 50 participants at the high point. And one of those participants from California said something that really stuck with me. And he said, I'm interested in the Freedom Cell Network because I want to have a way to engage with other people, a way to trade, a way to have access to food if I get shut out of grocery stores, for example. And now, just talk of that, maybe for some people may seem far-fetched or extreme. For many of you, you're right on board with that and have been following along with this agenda, as I called it before. But right now we have a situation where there are businesses that are fined if they have people in the store without a mask, right? We also have a situation where in China and Singapore and other countries, people aren't allowed to travel freely unless they have a green light on their immunity passport, which comes in the form of a smartphone app. So it's no longer far-fetched to think of governments, technocrats, utilizing technology in order to limit people's access to day-to-day activities. There's also a whole lot of talk about the COVID-19 vaccine that's coming down the pike. And as we well know, that there's been a desire by many health experts, public officials, to have vaccines be mandatory. Now, one of the ways that, there are mandatory vaccines in some circumstances, and one of the ways that governments compel obedience with different edicts is by removing privileges. For example, if you owe fines to the city of Austin, or if you miss a court date, then they can suspend your driver's license, right? Governments think that driving or traveling is a privilege. I beg to differ, but we'll save that for another video. We see recently the Real ID Act was passed. So for the longest time, governments were trying to create a national ID. And the Real ID Act passed maybe back in 2007, I believe. And there was immense pushback. Many state governments instituted nullification bills that said this is against the 10th Amendment. The federal government doesn't have a power to compel this national ID card. For those not familiar, Real ID was a federal law that required all states to comply with certain measures that were to be included on everyone's driver's license. And I resisted getting my license updated for quite some time and drove for maybe about 2 years without my license being renewed. And then as my kids got older, I didn't want to bother with getting pulled over and stuff. So I went to go renew it. And if you're in Texas, it has a little star on the corner. And that means that it's Real ID compliant, that there's biometric information, that it's capable of storing information and transmitting that information with a unified national network. Now, the way that they compelled obedience with the states and in turn the people, after much pushback, and that effort was delayed years and years, much to the dismay of the controllers that wanted to push it through. But the way that they compelled obedience was to say, if you don't have a Real ID compliant driver's license or identity card, government issued identity card, then you can't enter federal buildings and you can't fly or travel. So again, the precedent has been set for this mechanism of compelling obedience to be put in place. And it's not a stretch of the imagination to believe, again, because it's already taken place in other countries. In many ways, a lot of stuff that takes place in China is kind of a proving ground before it's imported here to the West. And many of the ruling elite and the globalists, for lack of a better term, are in bed with China. Even Henry Kissinger helped to normalize relations with China and set up relationships with China. And it was Henry Kissinger and there's other people that were praising China, and David Rockefeller praising China for their authoritarian regime, kind of wishing things were more authoritarian here in the United States. Well, now that we have all this COVID stuff, that's being escalated. So it's not far-fetched to believe that the compulsion of vaccines perhaps could be encouraged by limiting travel, for example. It's not far-fetched to believe that the compulsion of participation in a COVID-19 immunity passport, which is something that Bill Gates spoke very highly of, that's not a possibility. And we already see the technology that's coming out with the COVI-PASS. This is COVI-PASS, trademarked. The world's most secure digital health passport built on patented technology, awarded the Seal of Excellence by the European Commission and being used by various United Nations projects. There's a little video here. Let me know in the comments if you can hear this. Should be able to hear this.
By the multi-award-winning British cybersecurity firm VST Enterprises. COVI-PASS is powered by the revolutionary and patented V-Code and V-Platform technology.
Wow.
Here's how it works.
Here's how it works.
Using the secure COVI-PASS platform, an authorized healthcare professional, nurse or doctor can apply for an administration account that will be approved by a verified individual. Only an authorized user can create a digital
skip ahead here.
Unique serial number if a V-code is set the trigger date from 1 week before their next test date. The COVI-PASS digital passport is then assigned to the user's V-code. An individual can use their COVI-PASS digital passport by presenting their V-code either on their mobile, key fob or home printout. Once scanned, the COVI-PASS passport displays information securely using permission-based access.
So essentially how this will work is you get assigned a COVI-PASS ID and then they assign a corresponding COVID-19 test. And then once you take the test, the results are tied to your COVI-PASS ID. And then again, as we see, you can't enter the restaurant or the grocery store without wearing a mask. It's not far-fetched to believe that you can't enter the restaurant or grocery store without first presenting your COVI-PASS green light or red light. And here we see how it looks on the app down here. Here's a little COVI-PASS. COVID-19, nasal DNA, result negative. COVID-19, whatever, positive. This is exactly what took place in China and is taking place in Singapore. And there was this awesome Instagram video. I wish I could find it for you right now where this, I mean, it wasn't awesome, but it was rather telling, where this woman showed how just how integrated the immunity passport was when you're entering a neighborhood, when you're entering an apartment complex. Obviously, when you're entering a airport, you had to present your COVI-PASS. So I just want to point out that this isn't something that's far-fetched. This is all just part of a growing technocratic control grid, a technocracy, right? And what a technocracy is, Derek Brose has this awesome book called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. In the first chapter or so, he talks about the technocracy. I first heard about the technocracy several years ago. It's a 1920s phenomenon. This is just Wikipedia, and I hate to rely on Wikipedia, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time getting this ready for you guys at the beginning. I feel like I can speak to it pretty well without having to rely on a bunch of sources, but I just wanted to show you, just for a quick explanation. The term technocracy is derived from the Greek words tech, meaning skill, and kratos, meaning power, as in governance or rule. William Henry Smith, a California engineer, is usually credited with inventing the word technocracy in 1919 to describe the rule of the people made effective through the agency of their servants, the scientists, and the engineers. So essentially what a technocracy is not a democracy, which has its flaws completely, which is like a rule by the people, a rule by the majority. It's not an oligarchy, which is like a rule by the rich and that particular class. It's a rule by technocrats, by the scientific elite, by the philosopher king, so to speak, to put it in Plato's Republic terms. And we see this divination that's been granted to the experts, and there's just such a willingness to rely on the experts 110%. But in all reality, we see the experts changing here, and there's a lot of political science that's taking place that has a purpose beyond just the scientific exploration or the scientific method, the pursuit of truth. And a lot of it plays into this technocratic control grid. The Wikipedia article talks about the technocrats gaining influence in the 30s and with the passage of the New Deal as well, which was just the expansion of technocracy, expansion of control and influence of government into so many different facets of our lives. And then we see, if people are familiar with Zbigniew Brzezinski, he wrote this book called The Grand Chessboard, and he talked about this shifting world order and where there's going to be efforts to create hegemony, which is total power by the U.S., utilizing and leveraging the Middle East and taking away that sphere of influence from the Russians and the Soviets. Zbigniew Brzezinski was in the Carter administration. He played a role in Obama's administration, and Obama was greatly influenced by him as well. But he wrote this book called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era. I just want to read a quote from this book, which was written in 1970, I believe, and it's rather prescient and telling. And so in the quote, he says, "The technocratic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date, complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities." Now, a bunch of the work that I did in 2010, it was, Catherine Bleich and I, the mother of my kiddos, we learned about fusion centers, and we really did a good job of kind of blowing the lid off of this fusion center technology, which essentially is a law enforcement institution that merges local, state, and federal information gathering and intelligence sharing practices. It essentially brought the FBI and federal law enforcement into all of the local, even school district police departments, right? And they have these, if you've ever seen Minority Report, that's essentially what's taking place. And they even do pre-crime, and they think about trends, and they have all these computer screens. It's just like what you would see out of a futuristic dystopian movie, right? Because that's what we're living in right now. And it's just, we went around the country, we visited like 8 different fusion centers, and we would show up to them with open records requests and cameras rolling. It was great activism. Then we'd also put on little trainings about your rights and privacy, and the Department of Homeland Security. It was back in 2010 with activists and stuff. And when we came back home to Austin after that tour, they were trying to institute the Austin Regional Intelligence Center, which was the fusion center merging all the Central Texas, the Capital Area Council of Governments and stuff. And one of the things that they want to do, which we prevented them from doing, I'm sure they've since rammed it through, they were getting a federal grant from the Department of Homeland Security to execute this fusion center, the Austin Regional Intelligence Center. And one of the things that the money was going to be allocated for was for epidemiological review, which is understanding, tracking, and tracing viruses and epidemics, and also assisting in mass prophylaxis, which is the execution of mass vaccination campaigns. So they're going to utilize this law enforcement information intelligence sharing fusion center, Big Brother center, in order to assist the medical industrial complex in executing these vaccines. It's really scary stuff, but it's this Big Brother, it's the NSA listening and tracking and surveilling everything. So it's only natural that from what you're watching on your television, the conversations you're having, the text messages that you're having, all your Facebook, social media activity, your searching history, now it's being expanded even more into your medical records and your medical history. And this is very problematic. So to get back to what I was talking about, I've now painted a really scary picture for many of you that are following along from the Conscious Resistance Network. You know that this is a reality. Derek Brose's work, Derek Brose's research. Maybe you aren't watching on the Conscious Resistance Network and you're doubting some of this stuff. I encourage you to do your own research, but I want to offer what could be a solution. What is a solution, and what's a solution that's already underway? Just checking in on the comments. Everybody hearing me okay? Somebody said there was a lag. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. We're going to go to some of your comments here in a second. My videos usually run like an hour. We're going to try to get this one just to under 30 minutes. So let me present. This person said Technocratic. Yeah, Technocratic, essentially the same thing as Technocratic. The two words can be intermingled, but let me, this guy says, Jesse Ventura did an episode called Police State on his conspiracy theory show, Infraguard infusion centers, detainment centers, coffin liners. The episode was banned from air. That's funny that you mentioned that, because myself and Catherine, we were featured on that episode. It was great. Their crew came down to Austin, Texas. They actually flew Catherine up to Minnesota to be interviewed by Jesse Ventura. And he showed some of the work that we did, some of the videos that we uncovered. So that was super cool. So yeah, search Police State episode Jesse Ventura on YouTube. You can still find it there. It was a really good episode. That was a classic show too. Okay, so here's the solution. And again, I wanted to do this video because we were in the middle of our fourth annual conference call for fusion centers. And this guy said, I'm on this call and I want to get involved with this network for economic purposes. I'm concerned that I could get shut out from accessing grocery stores, so I want to be linked up with local farmers. So I want to introduce you to the Freedom Cell Network. Many of you are already familiar. Many of you are already participating in the Freedom Cell Network. You can go to freedomcells.org. Essentially what Freedom Cells are, at its core, small groups of around 8 to 10 people. We use the number 8 because it's been shown that 8 people tends to be the most creative, the most effective. It's the best number to achieve a common goal without having too much division and like ideas getting a little bit overwhelming. And when on the lower end, there's not enough ideas, there's not enough bodies and people to carry things out. So you form up a group of 8 people. It's called your inner cadre. You work together on common goals, such as everyone has 3 months food storage. Everyone has access to encrypted communication channels, and we form a group communication. Everyone has firearms and knows how to use them safely and proficiently. Everyone has a bug out plan. It can go further from that. We train martial arts together. We go to the firing range once a month. We have children. We do a play date. We organize a skill share once a week, so on and so forth, right? So that's your inner cadre group. But here's where the beauty is. You then take your inner cadre group, and those people go encourage the creation of other inner cadre groups, preferably in your geographic area in close proximity. You then network around 8 to 10 of those other groups of 8 to 10 people into what we call a middle cadre. Now you have around 64 people that are all dedicated towards a common purpose. You then encourage the creation of other middle cadre groups all throughout the region. So what we're trying to do here in Texas, there's many of us here in Central Texas. There's a ton of people in Houston. That's where Derek Brose is from. There's a lot of people in Dallas, Fort Worth. There's some down in New Braunfels. We're going to try to encourage the eventual meshing of all these disparate groups and create what we call a meta cadre. So maybe there's 8 groups of 64, which would be 512 groups. Then maybe we can link up with the groups in your area, whether you're watching from California, Minnesota, Australia, and we can have 8 groups of 512, which is somewhere over 4,000 people, right? And the idea is that if you don't participate with the immunity passport and you're not allowed in the grocery store, that's just fine. because you hadn't set foot in the grocery store for the past 6 months, because you linked up with the network of local farmers, because you got together with your inner cadre that all happens to live in the same part of town, and you guys created a community garden. Because you guys aren't relying on the conventional food, right? How crazy is it that the food that has chemicals is called conventional, and the food that doesn't have chemicals is more expensive, even though it has less chemicals? You know how it all works, right? It's all the mass production and stuff. And it's like, you can't enter this particular public square because you don't have your immunity passport, or you haven't taken the COVID vaccine. And it's like, well, we just set up our own intentional community. And we have 60 people of like mind that live on these 50 acres. And essentially, we're creating our own form of society. This is the real deal. And I want to show you that it's not just some far-fetched idea. And in fact, we have over approximately 2,077 people that are participating in the Freedom Cell Network. So this was an idea that I came up with back in 2015, did some podcasts, some speeches at some conferences. And then I kind of went inward a few years later, focused on my family, entrepreneurship, getting myself out of poverty. Derek Bros took the idea and spread it worldwide. And now, as you can see, the Freedom Cell Network is very much alive and well in the United States, Western Europe, Southeast Asia, South America. We've got some work to do in Africa. But so the cool thing about this website, go to freedomcells.org. What you're looking at here is the back end of the website. You can register on the site. Then you can put in your address, or put in an address down the road if you don't want to put your exact address. You create a little account. It's essentially like a social network. You can put in your address and pull up. Here, I'll put an address in. This is the old bookstore that I operated for a little bit. Brave New Books. I'm not going to put my actual address for all you guys to see. So you put your address in, and then you search, and then it pulls up the people in your area that are involved in the Freedom Cell Network. And so you're like, oh my God, I thought that I was all alone. But in fact, there's several people in my area. And the blue dots represent a Freedom Cell group. Oh, that's my location. There's also Freedom Cell groups. So there's already groups that are created. Many of them are regional. I created one, the Texas Freedom Cell Network. So we're trying to organize this network here in Texas. So you got these groups. You can also find the cells on a map, cell locator. And like I said, it's a social network, but we're trying to do so much more than that. We're trying to organize people in the real world. But you can post, you can have conversations. Ideally, you engaged with this network in order to build and to create. And already there were some people that were on the conference call the other day. And this one guy he went in the real world and went to a meeting in Colorado, organized by We Are Change Colorado, my boy Bruce B over there and company. And he was blown away that there exists this network. So we exist in a world that's totally divided. I mentioned how Freedom Cells have benefits in the growing technocratic state, but they also have benefits in the growing divided state, especially here in the United States of America, but it's the same all over the globe. There's such a nasty energy between people where they've put themselves and put others into groups, and they identify by a group identity, and they identify others by a group identity. And there's just such a strong emphasis on fear, distrust, anger of the other. And we see this already having taken place in this country for the past decade or so, but it's especially accelerated. It seemed to really start picking up under Obama, where the right wing and the conservatives and the Tea Party movement was like, we hate Obama, we hate Obama. And then the left wings were like, we're doubling down with our guy. And then when Trump took office, a very vitriolic character, it exacerbated that to the nth degree. Let me point out this quote real quick by Zbigniew Brzezinski. This is also in the book about the technocracy. He says, in the technocratic society, the trend would seem to be towards the aggregation of the individual support of millions of uncoordinated citizens easily within reach of magnetic and attractive personalities, exploiting the latest communication techniques to manipulate emotions and control reason. We see that taking place by the governors, by the media about fear with COVID. We see that taking place with big strongmen characters like Donald Trump, who has a huge following. And while I don't believe Donald Trump is part of the same paradigm of the deep state, which we always called the shadow government, But I do know that the technocratic control grid is continuing and accelerating regardless of having Donald Trump in office. And one thing that has accelerated immensely is the division, and the discourse is absolutely disgusting. For example, a good friend of mine, Dr. Matthew Buckley, also happens to be my naturopath. He is an anti-mask guy vehemently, right? And he went to this canoe shop down near Lake Austin, or I guess it's Ladybird Lake now, but we're still going to call it Lake Austin, and or Lake Travis, I'm sorry. And he didn't want to wear his mask. He wanted to get on a canoe. The people freaked out, said you can't do it. He tried to flex this Disabilities Act from the state of Texas, and he threatened to call the sheriff's department. They called the police. It was a big ordeal, but essentially he wanted to go on a damn canoe, but the business wouldn't let him. Me, I'm a libertarian private property rights guy, so regardless of my stance on a mask, if I'm going to enter a business or a restaurant and they're going to be like, hey, you got to wear a mask here, then I say, okay, fine, I'll just put the damn mask on, right? Oftentimes the businesses are doing so because in the city of Austin, they've been coerced by the government. And if they don't follow along, then they got to pay $1,000 fine. But I can still have sympathy with them. Like, I don't want these businesses to have to pay a fine. But nonetheless, somebody took a picture, shared it online, and said, look at this guy, Matt Buckley. He's such a POS, and he's trying to come here into this business, blah, blah, blah. And the slew of comments is absolutely vitriol, and it's really demonstrative of the state of discourse in America right now, whereby the two different sides, whether it's maskers, anti-maskers, BLM, All Lives Matter, Republican, Democrat, militia, boogaloo, Antifa, it's just no one is capable of taking a step back and being like, hey, I recognize that you're a human being and you have your own human experiences. You have your own view of reality. You have your own trauma that you may or may not have been through. And rather than just immediately view you as another and try to shout my position down your throat, I'm going to have compassion, take a step back and see if I can seek first to understand before trying to get you to understand my position. It's just, so the point is, I don't even know that I want to associate with a good bulk of society as is, where it's just so, there's so much ignorance, there's so much predisposition to be opposed to the other people around you. And so we have the opportunity to associate with people that don't want to engage in the reactive paradigm that's being inflicted upon everyone by the media, by the agenda. People that would rather be proactive, people that would rather build and create and criticize through creation, rather than trying to tear things down and tear people down. So I'm going to invite you. So far, my participation in the Freedom Cell Network and community has been absolutely joyful and harmonious, and there haven't been any haters or bad actors. Now, mind you, as the community grows, as we engage more, as we do in-person meetups more, as there's more social Zoom calls and all sorts of stuff, obviously there's going to be some people that emerge that probably have toxic personality, but we can deal with that on our own as it comes. For the most part, it's a very beautiful group of human beings, and I invite you to join. I listed some ways to get involved with the network. The first thing that you can do is join us on freedomcells.org. Again, we created this amazing social network where there's cells, there's activity, there's all sorts of videos and resources. And really, it's just a way that you can find people in your area. We even set up some events. There's been some people that did coffee meetup. These guys have a meetup coming up on April 7th. Oh, that's July 4th, actually, on July 4th. So that's super cool. There was a coffee meetup recently. We just had our 4th annual conference call. There's all sorts of groups that you can get involved with. And so this is what we're doing. Essentially, the way things are going right now, it's how they've been going for quite some time. It's a divide and conquer. It's the creation of a totalitarian global technocracy. It is violence, coercion, hate, war, surveillance, police, no bueno. It's yuck. And I think that we need to do something about it. Rather than engage within the political channels, which is by all means, if you're a freedom activist and want to get involved in politics in order to lower the government intrusion in our lives, by all means. But I think a better way of changing things It's also better than shouting at buildings and shouting at people with bullhorns. Better way to change things is to create and to educate people and teach them and inspire them and demonstrate that there's a better way to organize society that isn't based on hierarchical, top-down control paradigms, that doesn't need deception and false flags in order to carry out its will. Well, a group doesn't have a will essentially, but it doesn't need deception and all this treachery that's taking place. We can have people voluntarily participate, cooperate in order to achieve common goals. What might those goals look like? How about food production utilizing permaculture? How about exercise and focusing on natural health and the body's powerful ability to heal itself? How about coming together in order to grow spiritually and in order to learn from one another and learn from our past and become better human beings so we can better relate to our fellow humans, so we can leave future generations with a better world than what we were left with. So that's the promise. Big, grandiose, idealistic ideas. But it's not just ideas. It's not just a video on YouTube. It's a video on YouTube inviting you to take part in a real world movement, the Freedom Cell Network, that you can find at freedomcells.org, where we're not just complaining on Facebook, where we're not just begging the rulers in the halls of Congress, where we are going out, we are involving ourselves in the lives of our fellow human beings, we are interacting peacefully, voluntarily, cooperatively in order to build something different. And I have this vision, I have this dream that one day our numbers can grow, our infrastructure can grow, our network can grow to the point where we can eventually replace the institution of government altogether. Now, not everyone's going to participate in our crazy radical way of doing things, but hopefully we have enough people to where we can opt out, support one another, shield one another from the encroachment of the state. And we can just say, look, man, we're still going to be in this given geographic area, although we have a confederation of intentional communities, of private cities, of seasteads spanning all across North America, for example. And we have this confederation, we have ambassadors, and we'd like to come to the table to resolve any conflict that we may have with the state of Texas or the United States of America Incorporated. And we want to let you know that we're peaceful human beings. We don't mean anyone any harm, but we're no longer going to be participating in your taxation system. That's unlawful, unethical. We're no longer going to be participating in your necessity to have a COVID immunity passport or your vaccines up to date or your children vaccinated and your social security numbers for your newborn. We're not participating in that. And because we have the strength in numbers and because we're successful entrepreneurs that are earning tons of money, we have our own private fleet of planes, we are going to utilize these airwaves to travel, so on and so forth. Whatever. It's just some ideas, but you see how much we've grown just in the past 5 years already to a network of over 2,000 people. It's not just 2,000 people that want to write a blog post or call their congressman. It's 2,000 people that are ready to build the free society that we all deserve, a free society that's more in line with our freedom as beautiful, peaceful, sovereign human beings. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to see if there's any comments that I can highlight here. If there's any questions or anything anybody has, again, you can go to freedomcells.org, freedomcells.org. We would love for you to join us. Callie, Live Free With Me says, love and light. Yes, there is. Go on the site and search cells. We have one, Colorado Freedom Cell, I think. All right, that's what we like to see. See that? Callie, Live Free With Me is inviting you to live free with her by going to freedomcells.org. You actually have to do the work to find and meet up with others. Yes, that's what it's all about. And we created this network and this infrastructure for you to do just that. Take the vaccine and play the life or death lottery. That's right. For those of you on the fence about the vaccine, it's being rushed through. There was a lot of problems with the SARS vaccine. There's been problems with vaccines in the past. It's much better to focus on having a healthy immune system, not being in a reactive, interventive, allopathic Western medical paradigm, rather than getting back to the roots of Eastern natural medicine, where we give our body the nutrients that it needs in order to heal itself, because it's one fine-tuned machine whenever it's not all stressed out and crazy and problematic. I will not comply. Start an underground movement against the machine today. That's right. We have started an underground movement, and you can find it at freedomcells.org. Another thing, I encourage everyone to get Derek Brose's book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. You can find it at theconsciousresistancenetwork.com. And, we could even create our own anti-technocratic freedom underground railroad that's about escaping these pockets of control that still sets up the ability to travel. We have a lot of brothers and sisters down in Mexico right now at this very moment, and it would be great to have networks where we can circumvent travel. A lot of people are like, oh, you need to have your damn immigration status approved, so on and so forth. Well, like Dr. Ron Paul said back in the day, I'm not convinced that this border wall is meant to keep us in rather than keep people out. So, yeah. Sorry, don't have a smartphone, wink, wink. Now we're talking ripple in the pond. Derek Brose is all extreme when it comes to the smartphone and stuff. I got complacent in my own life as far as convenience. Like whenever I just finally tucked my tail between my legs and renewed my driver's license and got the registration sticker in my car, having children really pulled back the amount of risk that I was willing to take in order to take a stand. But that's why I've always contended that there's strength in numbers, there's strength in unity, and there's strength in truth. And if we can grow a giant network of people all on the same page, and we can opt out together and get each other's back, then it'll be a lot easier for people to take on more risk, because it won't just be the lone wolf standing there that's easily crushed. It'll be like 60 people that are like, we won't let you take our friend today. Callie, live free with me. I guess she's talking about the technocratic, opting out of the technocratic state. That's great. There are nurses who sent unused testers and they came back as infected. The company for test tips is ipsos morte when they die, which means they die in Latin. Yeah, and then even the COVID-19 tests, there's a bunch that are faulty. The CDC apparently sent a bunch of tests that were already infected with the vaccine. It's trouble. It's no bueno. So, all right, I appreciate everybody. Here's somebody asking a question. Sister-in-law admitted to hospital, cold legs, slight fever, and belly pain, keeping her 2 days for test. There's obviously something wrong here, correct? I mean, if someone is in such a bad spot that they need to be hospitalized, then something is potentially wrong. I generally don't favor Western medicine, but Western medicine does have a place. Hospitals do have a place. There are emergency conditions where people could definitely need hospitals and doctors and surgeries and so on and so forth. So just encourage your sister to use her best judgment. Make sure you're there for her, supporting her. And yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone tuning in and checking us out. Be sure that you go to freedomcells.org, so we can link up, so we can create the new free society we all deserve. Freedom cells or groups and walkie-talkies, and fight for freedom and your life. Now we're talking. Spiritual warriors bringing good prayer meditation to group. A universal prayer meditation is truth, freedom, health is beyond any one belief. Now we're talking. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is John Bush of the Live Free Now show. And again, there is a growing technocratic control paradigm that's being put in place. I've been an activist. I've been researching all this for the past 2 decades. Since COVID has happened, this agenda and this control program has accelerated at a rate I never thought possible. Nothing changes for me except motivation to get this idea out and encourage people to join us in developing these freedom cells. The path has just been accelerated, but at the same time, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Just like with 9/11, like sure as hell it accelerated the police state, but it also really woke a lot of people up to questioning the program and the paradigm. Just the same, this COVID stuff, they're really cracking down. They're rolling out the technocracy. They're controlling people. They're locking down the economy. But a lot of people are like, wait a second. Something ain't right here. And in turn, it helps us to grow and swell the ranks of the free thinkers and those that are looking for something different out of life, okay? And so this is all taking place right now. And we are left with a choice. What are we going to do? Are we going to buy into the division? Are we going to spend our time hating other people? Are we going to spend our time criticizing people? Are we going to use nasty language on Facebook and stupid memes and that damn little laughing emoji that I do my best not to get triggered, but when I say something, I'm like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. I hope people understand this position and hopefully enlightens them a little bit. And then people are just like, laugh emoji. And I'm like, is that what we're going to do? Laugh emojis? Or are we going to get out there and build a new way of doing things that we can pass on to future generations and hopefully not have to repeat this crazy cycle of violence, freedom, violence, freedom, violence, freedom? We can just have freedom. However, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So I'm going to leave you with that. This is John Bush signing out. Peace and freedom. Go to freedomcells.org. Thanks to our sponsor, freeounceofkratom.com. Bye.